All right. Restream says 1, 2, 3, go. So here we are. Welcome back to Simon Chardiet's New York Stories. I haven't done it in a while because it's been the summer, and I'll tell you the truth. I'm outdoors a lot in the summer. Outdoors every chance I get. Sometimes till after dark. And then I got to keep up with music and keep up with everything. And the summer just ended. It ended the way it began. The summer began on April 24th when I rode my bike into Manhattan, and me and Champ rode our bikes in, and we went to see the Madball Murphy's Law show in Tompkins Square Park. I couldn't stay for the whole show because I had a gig that night, but it was just good to be like out in the sun, and I seen so many like old punk rockers and hardcore people and just people, that I knew from some of the people that were in this story. And then it ended the 25th, again, Tompkins Square Park. I played there, Simon and JJ, my two-piece band, and JJ Murphy on drums and me on guitar. And we played there one of the Chris Flash shows, and there was so many people that were there. There was people that are in the New York stories that were there, that day, or that will be in the New York stories, like Jerry Price from 2 Minute Tape, and Vincent Elliott, like that I grew up across the street from him, and his brother Emil, and oh my God, just so many people. Milo Z from the Worms. It was like the story of my life. So that's how the summer kind of wound up. So that's what we did this summer, me, myself, and I. But now we're gonna get into Joey Miserable and the Worms kind of heyday. It might be a little rambling. Uh, the Worms had been around for about 2 or 3 years, but I, I had been through a lot of stuff in those years, and I was not the most stable guy, and I was, like fucking around with a lot of drugs. Like the thing with the outsets, that thing for me, it kind of fizzled out. They went on without me. They did very well without me, but they were kind of mad that I was playing in more than one band. And I started kind of drifting around. I played with Richard Lloyd from television for a while, and then Jono got us hooked up with Bo Diddley's booking agent. So we wound up playing with Bo Diddley, and that was really great. We played the bitter end. Bo Diddley was such a great guy. He was so cool. He was like my dad or something, and total gentleman. He was so nice to us kids, and he taught us his music. At one point he got up, and Chuck was playing drums, and Chuck was trying to play and Bo Diddley was like, no, play it like this. A two beat, right? Instead of a clave beat. That's the Bo. That's so Bo Diddley wanted you to play a two beat behind him. And then he was just so nice to us. When the guy that owned the bitter end tried to not pay us, he tried to stiff us, but he made the mistake of telling us he wasn't going to pay us at the beginning of the evening, and we told Bo Diddley about it, and we were like, look, he doesn't want to pay us, and we're in a real predicament here because, you're Bo Diddley, you're our hero. We don't want to just like walk off and not play. But the guy, and so Bo Diddley went and I gave the guy dressing down, and he came back and handed us our money. So we did get paid, and somewhere there's a picture of the whole band, which I think it was like Chuck and was me and Jono. I think the bass player was either Mark Ettinger or Joe Drift on that gig. Chuck was playing the drums on that gig, but we're all, and on Bo Diddley, we're all giving the camera the finger. I used to have a print of it, but in the fog of my junkiehood, it disappeared. Oh man, what I wouldn't do to have that picture today. That would be like my crowning fucking achievement in my life, you know, to play with Bo Diddley. So that was a good thing. And Chuck was our saxophone player, but he could play pretty good drums. But we never had. Sometimes we would get like session drummers to fill in for a gig or two that were more solid, but we didn't have a drummer that really had the beat and really had the consistency of the beat and the kind of propulsion that we needed. But we still kind of, you know, soldiered on. Jono, you know, we had various drummers, you know, but they were never really like the right thing for what we were doing. And then we eventually, after Tyrone passed away, Jono had to split for a year. He went away for like a year. He had to go take care of some things, so we didn't have that great second guitar of Jono. Like me and Jono, even though we haven't played together in a long time, we had this thing where we could just sit down or stand up, whatever, get together, and with our guitars, it automatically just became this combination of sounds and styles that weaved around each other perfectly. And so we had that real interaction, that chemistry as players, you know, where we just could we just knew what the other guy was going to do before they even did it. Like I played with Richard Lloyd for a little bit. I played with some other bands. I played with this band Crypt-Ease. It was like a really early psychobilly band, kind of a cross between like Cramps and I guess like a 60s garage band, you know, right? So I played with them for a while, but what happened is that Jono had to split. I was trying to keep the band together, and you know, I also just myself, even maybe not being the most clear-headed guy back then. Like I went over to Paris for a while. I went over to Paris for a while, and some shit happened over there. I got hurt. I got injured over there, and I had some other shit didn't work out. So like I came back, and I just started like really getting like fucked up. You know, I kind of was just a drifter. So, and then the whole thing happened. You know, we did those Bo Diddley gigs and everything, but then Jono was away, and then Greg Poulos, I was talking about him before. You know, Greg did a lot of crazy things. Like I met him when him and his friends were going to try to rob me until they realized I was friends with the eye doctor, who they were afraid of. Everybody was afraid of the eye doctor. I just talked to him today, but Greg had, you know, I always saw him. He did some things. He took me for a ride on this motorcycle. It was like this dirt bike that he had just stolen from someplace. I was coming home. It was like 7 in the morning. I was coming home from some fucking exploits of mine or whatever. So I was coming back. I used to keep my guitar at my mother's house because she would let me raid her refrigerator too, or like crash on a couch or whatever. So he gave me a ride on his motorcycle, just like 10 blocks. It scared the crap out of me. Also, there was this guy in our neighborhood, Clancy, and he wasn't the brightest guy. He was like about 7 feet tall. He looked like Frankenstein, but he was a little slow. You know, he was a little touched. And he was a doorman. And this guy came up in a cowboy hat and cowboy everything. Like there was this big fad in New York back then. It's like the least fucking cowboy place ever, right? It's like the fucking East Coast. And these guys walk around with like spurs and vests and cowboy hats, you know. Meanwhile, they were like, Moishe Kaplan from Brooklyn, but they wearing a cowboy hat, right? So this guy comes up and he had a brand new Mercedes, and he gave Clancy, the doorman, the keys. And Greg just grabbed the keys from Clancy and jumped in the car and took off. And he picked up a bunch of guys from the neighborhood, and they went out all night driving around. They drove down to 42nd Street. They were driving around trying to talk to girls, and they realized the car was going to run out of gas. The sun was coming up. They were down on those piers on the west side, and they just took the car, put a brick on the accelerator pedal, and ran the fucking Mercedes into the Hudson River. But Greg had also stolen a camera, so he took a picture of the car as it went into the river and shit. I always thought that was class. You know, Greg had a lot of fucking class, man. A lot of style, always, you know. And his mom, too. His mom's so nice. She's one of those moms that lets all the neighborhood kids hang out in her house all the time and looks after them, you know. So Greg had stolen a really powerful motorcycle and got hit by an ambulance, and he got really, really injured to where he was in a wheelchair. And I heard of it, and I used to go over to his house, and he was just like facing, being in a wheelchair and all this fucking bad shit. So Greg always loved music, so I would go over there with my guitar like, all the time and just sit down and play guitar for him all the time and for his mom and try to, I didn't know what else I could do for him, I just felt bad for him because he'd gotten hurt, and I did time, and his cousin Johnny would always be over there, and when I met them, they were gonna like beat me up and steal my guitar, but now I'm here playing guitar for them. I you know what I mean? So I'm up there in his house, and eventually he got some kind of settlement or lawsuit. He got some kind of money, and he said to me, "Simon, I want to manage the Worms. I want to make a record on you guys. I want to manage you, And I was like, "Holy shit, this is great," And about the same time, we had been playing Dan Lynch. Now, Dan Lynch was like a fountainhead for me meeting people. That's where I really put the Worms together. That's where I met Big Jerry Duggar. He'd only been playing bass for like maybe a few months, but he was already just such a rock solid bass player. Like I walked in the first time I ever saw him play, and they were playing some blues shuffle, and he was just so locked in and so solid. And his bass had that real deep sound, and it went all the way down, He was just so on it. Just had that God-given gift of music in him, he still does. And that's where I met Howie Wyeth, and I'd seen Howie playing for years with like Link Ray and Robert Gordon, Chris Spedding. Like he played with every band in town. He was always in the house band at the Lone Star Cafe. He was like in the fucking house band there. I mean, and he'd be playing there. And Charles Honey Boy Otis, who, I would play with at the Blues Jam and talk, and he would, show me some things. He was always showing me about blues and soul music and how to play it. And Charles was such a great person. He was like another person like Bo Diddley was like my dad. He's always impeccably nattily dressed and always just such a gentleman. And he just the way he carried himself. I mean, he was 6'7" or something, but skinny as a rail. He was built like a basketball player, which as a matter of fact, he had been. And he was from New Orleans, and he was another person. Then there was Curtis Fields, who was also in the house band at the Lone Star, and he had come off the road playing with Ray Charles. He played with Charles Mingus and Stevie Wonder. I mean, the guy was no joke. He was like a R&B alto sax player, and we had Chuck. So we started putting things together. You know, like we got Jerry on the bass. We get Howie or Charles on the drums, or George Morales, right? We get Curtis on the saxophone. So, you know, Jono came back to the band. You know, he came back from what he was doing. He was back with us. So now, like, we had the people. You know, you got to have the people to get the sound and the rhythm. When you got the sound and the rhythm, then the audience will come and they'll dance. And then we were never getting much love at Dan Lynch. They would maybe give us one gig on a Monday night every few months. And then I got into some trouble at Dan Lynch. I went in there with Zahn, and we just wanted to play. We went in there, our guitars, and we got up there, and it was like all the guys from Pop Tones. So we went up playing at Dan Lynch, and you know, Pop Tones was a punk band. We weren't a blues band. We loved the blues. Everybody, you know, Zahn loved blues. We all did. We loved Earl Hooker. We used to sit around and listen to Earl Hooker and Freddie King and Gatemouth Brown and, you know, the Triniers. I mean, we loved the blues, but we were a punk band, so we got thrown out at Dan Lynch. They pulled the plug on us, and I lost. You know, I'm known for losing my temper. I think it's really, I can't, I could bullshit you and tell you it's the Cuban half of me. You know, I'm half Cuban. My father, it's my Cuban temper, whatever, but it's not. It's just I'm a fucking asshole, so I lose my temper. You know, it don't matter where I was from. So, anyway, so I kind of lost my temper. Pardon me, my nose itches. So we got tossed out of Dan Lynch. We were like, so right there and then, this guy calls me Ira Zadekow, and he had this free jazz band, the Swollen Monkeys, and it was kind of like skronk, like DNA, Otto Lindsay, kind of Teenage Years and the Jerks, Lounge Lizards, like kind of jazz stuff, like free jazz. And they weren't. He asked me would I be willing to take over booking the place. So yeah, I took over booking the place. I just booked my own ass in there like every night. So the Worms were playing there every night, and we started building a following pretty quick. When we started playing Nightingales, it was still a luncheonette, and it had like those glass trays with the coffee cake and the bran muffins and everything. But it was really a tranny hooker pickup joint, and there was all these tranny hookers and their pimps in there. And that whole corner, 13th Street and 2nd Avenue, there was like crack, dope, heroin, regular hookers, and, you know, like, like transgendered hookers, right? You know, like, and a lot of them weren't even transgender. They were just guys wearing dresses or whatever, you know. So there was like, they kind of like, you know, whatever somebody was into, they could probably find it on that fucking corner besides great live music. And then Nightingales, the hookers took their tricks to the 2nd floor, and the 3rd floor was gambling, but it was Chinese gambling. It was all these gambling things they was doing. And I don't gamble. I never did. But it was like, it was Chinese gambling, so it was different, you know. I don't know what they were doing up there, but I just do know that that building had, like, you know, a lot of things going on. And out in the street was all hookers and crack, and I was, you know, was my kind of a fucking corner. One time the Worms are playing, and this is funnier. There's this there's this whole Irish family from the Bronx that me and my brother were tight with, and one of the girls had gotten herself in this trouble with heroin, and she wound up, uh, God bless her, but she wound up working. She was working the street, you know what I mean? She wound up having to do that, and I hear we're playing, and I hear like crack, crack, crack outside. And this guy comes running in holding his ass, and he comes running in really fast holding his ass, and he runs in the bathroom and locks the door. And these guys come in, and they're looking around. They have guns in their hand to smoke. You smell the cord, and they put their guns back in their waist, and they split. I told the band, keep playing, and because if you keep playing, they won't shoot you. You see what I mean? You keep playing no matter what. You don't stop playing when that shit happens. You keep playing. I always tell that to my music students. So that's one of the things that happened. You know, and another thing that happened is it was a tranny hooker place. So one of our drummers, he came up to me. One of our it's one of our drummers. I won't name. He was like, I met this really nice girl. I met this really nice girl. And I was like, that ain't a girl. That's a guy with a dress on. I mean, I'm not, no judgment here. It's my duty to inform you that is not an actual, woman, And he got really pissed at me. He goes, you always ruin everything. Why do he says to me, you always ruin everything. I meet a nice girl and all you want to do is like shit in my hat. I was like, listen, not for nothing. I'm just telling you what's up. I mean, whatever you want to go. I ain't gonna judge nobody on kind of shit, So then comes back, he's missing. So Chuck is playing the drums. So finally, halfway through the second set, the drummer goes back, and he's kind of green in the face. He looks like he just saw a ghost or something. So I was like, hey, how's your girl doing? How was your girl? You have a good time? He goes, that girl, uh, it wasn't a girl. I said, I could have told you that. He goes, I did it anyway. All right, get back behind them drums, man. So we started building up quite a following. Our first following, like I said, were these guys with dresses on that were pulling tricks on the street. And they were great. There was this one Miss Thing. Miss Thing was great. I never really figured out like what Miss Thing's actual plumbing situation was. But Miss Thing was one of our earlier fans. Probably about 6 feet tall and about 250, 300 pounds, I'm really glad Miss Thing liked my music because Miss Thing could have fucking knocked me out with one punch. So I'm glad Miss Thing liked me. And then there were these pimp guys in pimp hats and like various things they would wear. Russian fur hats, I remember. And like those big sunglasses, just like Booby Cherasani was wearing, and they were smoking this stuff, and it smelled like burning breath mints. It kind of had this acrid but like mint kind of smell. I was like, what the fuck are they smoking? And it was crack. This would be like 1983, 1984. And as I smelled crack, I mean, at that time, I kind of cleaned myself up a little bit because I was involved with my kid's mom. And I was with her, and, I always wanted to have, I never really had a steady girlfriend for a long time or anything. So this is like the first time I never really, had gone steady. And, I was involved with her, so I was trying to keep my shit together because, I knew I'd done plenty of fucking drugs. I knew what I kind of knew it was not a good idea to be like, doing, a few years later, I fucking, succumbed to all that shit. But at that point in my life, I was like still young, and I kind of like took a step back. Like I'd smoke weed or drink a Ballantine ale. Maybe once a month or so I would dabble in some more harder shit, but I wasn't like doing a lot. I wasn't a consistent hard drug abuser back then, which was good for the band, you know? So I kind of, backed off a little bit, I was still able to pull back from the brink, So we were playing and then, I was working as a messenger, as I always would on the side. Now it's a surfing instructor. Back then it was messenger. But I worked as a messenger until my early 50s, and then now I'm doing a surf teaching thing. But I was working as a messenger, and I was talking to this guy, and he said, yeah, I play trumpet. I heard you're in a band. I just got off the road with James Brown. It was Holly Farris who played on, like, Get Up Off of That Thing and all those James Brown records from the late 70s. That's him. So I was like, hey, man, come down to Nightingale's Friday night. You got a gig. So now we had like Curtis Fields and Holly. Chuck had gone off. Chuck was always like in and out of the bands. That's just how he was. He'd be with us for a while, and then something would happen, and he'd be off playing with somebody else, and then he'd come back. So we kind of had either Charles Honeyboy Otis or Howie Wyeth on drums. And then we had Curtis Fields on alto, Holly Farris. And so we had three guys that were older guys than us, guys that were in their late 40s or late 30s, that had actually played back in the 1950s. So these guys, I was in a band with three guys that were like my heroes that I looked up to. Like, I mean, Howie played with Link Ray and the Raymen. So, like, what the fuck more do you want? He played with Bob Dylan, You don't need no more better credentials than that. Charles Otis, forget about it. You want to hear who he played with? Huey Piano Smith and the Clowns. All right, Joe Jones, you talk too much. He played with Lloyd Price. He played with Professor Long. Fats Domino, Little Richard, Otis Redding, Sammy Davis, John Hammond. Played with Jimi Hendrix when Jimi Hendrix was playing on Bleecker Street, like before he went to England. He played with a lot, Jerry Jamar, Cornell Dupree, all these great musicians. So when I saw him, he'd playing with Lightning Hopkins, Big Joe Turner. I used to go down there every night and listen to Big Joe Turner. That's how I learned how to sing. Sitting there listening to Big Joe Turner every night. That's how I learned how to fucking sing. And that was my singing lessons. That and 2 lessons with Katie Agresta, who's the greatest. So anyhow, so we started, people started coming in when, like, Dan Lynch wouldn't give us a regular gig, so we lucked in. We were playing right next door, and like Joey Miserable and the Worms, like I said, we weren't a hardcore band or even a punk band. Now, hardcore was really big back then, so the whole hardcore thing, I always loved it. I always loved those early bands. I loved to listen to them. I loved to go to shows, but for some reason, except for the Pop Tones, back then I was never in a punk band. Pop Tones didn't play hardcore. Pop Tones were more like a 77 style punk band, but they fit in the hardcore scene, and you could see, I have tapes and everything. I do Pop Tones tunes. I do 5 or 6 of them still to this day, but except for them, I was never really any full on like punk rock, crank it up to 10 blast bands. I was. So the Worms, we weren't doing that. Plus, everybody was doing that. There was a million hardcore bands. But I used to go see, like, Toxic Reasons, Subhumans, the DOA, early versions of the Cro-Mags, the Stimulators, the Bad Brains, of course, Misfits, Agnostic Front, Warzone. I mean, all those bands were around, and I used to go see them all. But then we were playing, like, like like rhythm and blues, Gary U.S. Bonds kind of shit, Gary U.S. Bonds kind of sound. Uh, and we were playing, like a lot of R&B, like Chris Kenner, Come On, Let Me Show You Where It's At, Fats Domino tunes. We were playing rockabilly tunes. We were playing tunes that Jono wrote or that I wrote. So we were more like rhythm and blues, rockabilly, and doo-wop. We would do a cappella. Everybody in the band could sing really good, so we would do the a cappella stuff. So we were more like, I guess you would call it, pardon me, my nose itches again. We were an Americana band. We were playing right in the middle of the Lower East Side at the height of this, like 83, 84, 85, at the height of the fucking, whole hardcore thing. So the thing about that is that, we didn't have mosh pits or anything. We had just like, so people would just dance all night. But we were playing more like Americana music, and we had, like I said, we had three young guys, me, Jeremy, and John, and we had three old guys. He was either Charles or Howie. And then there were these other guys, like I just saw, like, Vince, grew up across the street from him. And then his, he had, and there was Z. Pardon me, I'm on standby till they fix. All right, they fixed it. Thank you, Restream. Milo Z was friends with all these guys I knew, like Garth Burton and Gary Cintron, and anyway, so Milo, I knew this guy Youth Dog. He was my first guitar student that I ever had, 1982. This guy Youth Dog, and I used to cop dope for him too, and basically all I was concerned back then was getting a bag of dope and a nickel bag of weed. So like that was my price for guitar lesson: dime bag of heroin, nickel bag of weed. Give me that, and you got a guitar lesson, and give me some pills and a joint. That's how I was back then. So he was my first student, but Milo used to jam with him too. But Milo could keep time. He was one of the few drummers in New York that could actually keep a beat that I knew. George Morales was always really good. Yves Girard, and then there was, of course, the great Howie, the great Charles, But most of the other drummers, the big challenge back then in New York was there just wasn't that many drummers that could actually, like, okay, give me 4/4 time at 146 beats per minute. Like they could have played tempos. You know what I mean? Like that was back when everybody had like fancy ass fucking double bass 20 rototoms, and they just there wasn't a lot of drummers in rock and roll that could actually keep time. I remember John Wilson, the only rock drummer I knew in high school that actually could keep time. I was so impressed. I saw him play with Galactus or Toast or one of those bands, and he could actually keep fucking time. I was like, holy shit, that's amazing. There's this other guy, Billy, I used to play with from Queens Village. He used to be able to keep time. But most of the drummers, it was just like a lot of pots and pans, They weren't really playing no fucking beat. So once we had the beat, then the people came in, and we started recording our first record, and we were doing it at night at Quadrasonic, and Greg was helping us out. He helped us out with some equipment, and then I found my Les Paul, one of my Les Pauls down on the way to Quadrasonic. It took a while to pay it off, and actually my kid's mom paid it off for me. I'll never be able to repay her for that, but You know, it took me years. I used to go play guitar in the street and then go to the guitar store with a bag of quarters and try to pay him in change. Man, was he pissed. You know, he's used to like Ace Frehley or like Keith Richards coming in and buying a guitar, you know, like, and he's got to deal with me. I mean, would you want to deal with me, you know? So, we're making the record and we're playing Nightingales, and now we start to do better. We're playing the Lone Star after my debacle there where I fucking double booked myself and cut myself in the face with a bottle and kind of got thrown out of there in disgrace, but they forgave me. We were playing the Lone Star all the time. We opened up for the Ventures. We opened up for Ronnie Spector. We opened up for like Lee Von Helm, Rick Danko. We opened up for Dr. John. And then we, you know, we just used to, so we were kind of like, you know, moving along. Here we come, you know, starting to get into our heyday of the Worms, you know. And so it's like New York 1984 now. Still playing the Pop Tones. We played C Squat. I'll never forget that. Like, it was because the Pop Tones, you know, I started shaving my head probably like 1982, 1983. And like, I'm a punk rocker. I'm not a skinhead. Harley Flanagan told me I'm not a skinhead. So I'm not a skinhead. So don't get me wrong. I know I'm not a skinhead. You know, I'm a New Yorker, but I'm not no skinhead. So I started shaving my head because my hair was falling out, and I used to give myself these really bad haircuts. And like one day, my brother told me just shave it all off. So I did. My mom came home. She didn't recognize me with my head shaved. She started screaming, "Oi, got in your face, mirror!" And then she realized it was me, and she just fucking hit me in the face. She goes, "Bap!" She goes, "Baldy!" She was pissed. I shaved my head, you know, and so how did I get into this shit? So the Pop Tones at that point, we had Tommy Price, Jerry Price's brother. They'd go on to, like, Tom go on to 2 Minutes Hating and FF. Fucking great musician. We lost him a while back, man, like 10 years ago. We lost him. His brother's Jerry Price. I just saw Jerry the other day, and Jerry's still with us, man. So I shaved my head, and I was playing the Pop Tones, and we got Paulie Pee Head on bass, and he was great. Like, Tom really could keep fucking time, and Paulie Pee Head was solid. Zon taught him how to play the bass. Zon taught him really well, and Paulie was just laying it down. So we had a good lineup in the Pop Tones too. And then we had a good lineup at Barbecue Bob and the Spare Ribs, because we had me and Bob and Kevin Trainer and Howie or Charles. You know, we interchanged drummers between the Worms and the Spare Ribs. And then we'd always have some kind of crazy great bass player, some crazy upright bass player, like this guy, the Professor, you know, or Andres, or Dave Drywitz, or Andres Villamil. So we always had these great upright bass players. So, like, it was a great time for me with bands, because I was in Barbecue Bob and the Spare Ribs playing blues, Pop Tones playing punk, and then the Worms playing, like, everything, you know? Everything, you know? The Worms, we played, like, a lot of different styles of music, but everybody, you could dance to it all fucking night. All had that beat, you know? So, it was a good time for me with the music. And I was also busking. I was playing the street with Mr. Thing and his fabulous mellow tones. I had this little shitty sounding battery amp, but I used to go out and play the streets at day and then go play the bars at night, you know, and just play. I was trying to learn music, you know. At this point, I've been playing like 14 years or something, but, you know, I was still trying to learn. I was trying to learn everything, you know. And I was living on Ludlow Street with my kid's mom. We didn't have kids yet. We were living on Ludlow Street, and we were pretty poor. We were eating like wheat berries, government cheese, going, you know, shit like that. You know, queso de papa, whatever, fried potatoes, you know, whatever we could fucking rustle up. Hare Krishnas, right? So, But it was some good times. And I remember I went to Pop Tones rehearsal. It was in Staten Island. So once again, I'm lugging my Les Paul and my amp on the Staten Island ferry to get on a bus with it. It's amazing. I'm only like 5'3" and 140 pounds, and back then I was like 125 pounds because I had no muscles. I was just a skinny old piece of shit. So, but I would lug my shit everywhere, you know, and so I had to take the bus from the ferry, and I get off the bus, and all the guys in the Pop Tones had shaved their heads in my honor. So now everybody in the band has a shave. They all shaved their heads. So we're all walking down the street. We all have like combat boots on and shaved heads. So like these we got into it with these like disco heads. This Camaro with Jersey plates comes out, and they're like, "Yeah, you look like shit, you fucking weirdos." And one of them like starts like, you know, mouthing off to us. So we all turn and look at them, and Zahn ran right at him. And he was like, "There's gonna be blood, a lot of blood, your blood." And he pulls out this big fucking chain out of his pocket and starts swinging it, and the Camaro just takes off. We were like, "Go back to New Jersey, you fucking Guidos," or whatever, you know, like. So that's one thing that happened. And we used to practice at Paulie Pee Head's house in Staten Island. And then we played C Squat, and that was a really fucking great show. There was a whole other bunch of bands on that show, and we played there. And then we played like this more like hippie squat on Avenue C and 9th Street. We played C Squat, and we played at the A7. And my last New York stories is my rant about those guys like not having shows at A7 because of a fight. You know, like I don't know what to tell you. You know. Like, nobody ever got into a fight at a punk rock show, man. But then I think Lawrence Welk is punk as fuck. He really is. Used to take acid and watch the Lawrence Welk show. Lawrence Welk is punk as fuck. That's fucking punk rock right there. That motherfucker's tripping balls, man. So anyway, they all got it. You know, we shaved heads. So that was like a fucking thing, you know. Like, here I am, I'm 24 maybe, and I've been doing this. This is all I wanted to do for like the last 16 years of my life is music, 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 and it's kind of all coming together, you know, right now at this point, 1984, you know. And I'm trying to be a good boy. I mean, I was smoking weed. I drink the occasional Ballantine, but I was never a big drinker. But I couldn't really, you know, once in a while I'd kind of sneak off and sniff like a bag of dope like once a month, but I wasn't doing it all the time. So I was really trying to, you know, focus on music. And I'd go up and I'd get like a nickel bag of weed and those 99-cent rhythm and blues records. I still have them. They're fucking great records. Like, one of them was 20 rhythm and blues hits, and it just had everything on it. Another one was the best of Etta James, and it is on. They're all on Crown or Kent, and they were like 99 cents. You go to First Avenue and 10th Street, get the record for 99 cents, and then go to 10th Street and Avenue B, get a bag of weed. Go back home, drink Cafe Bustelo, smoke weed, and listen to the records. You know. And back then, you know, that I listened to records a lot. I'd smoke weed and go into this trance and live in this fantasy world inside the record and like analyze every last little thing everybody was doing on the record. But all right, I'm going to sign off now. That's the next installation here of Simon's New York Stories. This Worms thing is going to be long chapters because I'm going to kind of get into the whole thing, you know. And it was so great to see Milo Z the other day, man. Like, holy shit. So this show goes out to Greg Poulos. It goes out to Emil and Vincent, the Elliott brothers, you know, who I've known my whole life. Paul Thomas, I know my whole life. Goes out to Jerry Price. Goes out to Milo, Jono, Jerry Duggar, Holly Farris. Goes out to the late, great Curtis Fields. late great Howie Wyeth, late great Charles Honeyboy Otis, the late great Tom Hosier, who was like the door guy at Nightingales. And like, mwah, okay, I'll be back soon now that the weather's getting cold.